My name is Alex. I'm a software developer, which mostly means long hours staring at a screen, fueled by too much coffee, and dealing with a constant low hum of stress. My escape, my way of resetting my brain, has always been hiking. Specifically, I loved exploring Blackwood Forest, a sprawling, unkempt stretch of wilderness just outside of town. It was my sanctuary, the place I went to hear nothing but the wind in the trees and the crunch of leaves under my boots. Or at least it used to be. Now, the mere thought of Blackwood Forest makes my skin crawl and a cold knot form in my stomach. Blackwood isn't what you'd call a friendly forest. It's ancient, the kind of place where the trees are thick and gnarled, their branches like arthritic fingers, clawing at the sky. The canopy is so dense that even on the brightest summer days, the forest floor is trapped in a perpetual twilight. You learn to navigate by the subtle shifts in light and the feel of the ground. Locals have always had their little tales about it, of course. People getting turned around easily. Even experienced hikers losing their bearings for hours. Whispers of strange lights seen flickering between the trees at night. Or an unnerving silence that could swallow sound whole. I always brushed it off as local folklore, the kind of stories that spring up around any large, dark wood. I'm not so quick to dismiss them anymore. A few weeks ago, on a Saturday that started like any other, I headed out for my usual hike. I remember feeling particularly drained from a rough week at work, and I was looking forward to losing myself in the green and quiet. I must have been more preoccupied than usual, because I wandered further off my familiar trails than I intended. I was in a part of Blackwood I didn't recognize, where the undergrowth was thicker and the silence more profound. It was the kind of quiet that feels heavy, pressing in on you. That's when I saw it. Not the keys, not at first. It was a glint of something metallic, something out of place, half hidden beneath the exposed, gnarled roots of an enormous oak tree. This tree was a behemoth, easily the oldest I'd ever seen in Blackwood, its bark like a weathered, deeply crevised map of time. Curiosity, that fatal human trait, got the better of me. I pushed aside some damp leaves and loose soil. It was a small, tarnished metal box, rectangular and surprisingly heavy for its size. It wasn't locked. With a bit of effort, the lid creaked open. Inside, nestled on a bed of what looked like faded, decaying velvet, was a ring of keys. These weren't like any keys I'd ever seen. There were 5 of them, each one distinctly different from the others, wrought from some dark, dull metal that didn't reflect the vigor light through the canopy. They felt cold in my hand, an intrinsic coldness that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature of the forest. The largest key was particularly ornate, its bow shaped into an intricate, almost unsettlingly organic pattern, like intertwined thorns or bones. The teeth were complex, unlike any modern lock mechanism. As I ran my finger over its surface, I could feel faint, almost invisible etching symbols. Maybe, or some forgotten script. They were so worn down it was hard to be sure. A weird prickle ran up my arm when I touched them, like a discharge of static electricity. but colder, deeper. My first instinct, a surprisingly strong one, was to drop the box, to leave it where I found it and walk away. They felt wrong, ancient and wrong. But then, almost immediately, another sensation washed over me, a strange, subtle pull, a whisper in the back of my mind that urged me to take them. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, but a powerful sense of compulsion. They could be valuable, I told myself, trying to rationalize the sudden, inexplicable possessiveness I felt. Or historically significant. I'm not a collector, nor a historian, but those were the justifications that surfaced. So, I closed the box, slipped it into my backpack, and tried to shake off the lingering sense of unease. Back in my apartment, the keys and their box felt even more out of place. Under the bright, artificial light of my kitchen, they looked even older, the tarnish deeper, the symbols more cryptic. I tried cleaning one of the smaller keys, but the grime seemed almost fused to the metal. I spent a couple of hours online, trying to identify the symbols or the style of the keys, but found nothing. They were unique, or at least, nothing like them was cataloged in any database I could access. That night, the unsettling occurrences began. I had the most vivid, disturbing dreams. I was wandering through endless, dark, twisting corridors, the air thick with the smell of damp earth, and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like old blood. All around me was the sound of locks turning, heavy tumblers clicking into place, bolts sliding home. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the echo of those sounds still in my ears. During the day, small things started to happen. Tiny, out of place noises in my usually quiet apartment. A faint scratching sound from the corner of the living room, like a mouse. But I've never had mice. A soft click from the hallway, when I was sure I was alone, like a door latch settling, or a tumbler falling into place. I'd dismiss them, of course. The building settling, my imagination working overtime after those dreams. Then, objects in my apartment began to seem slightly moved from where I was certain I'd left them. Nothing major, nothing that would scream intruder, just enough to make me second guess myself, to plant a seed of doubt. My favorite coffee mug, the one I always keep on the left side of the coffee machine, would be on the right. The book I'd left face down on my nightstand would be closed, the bookmark I'd used tucked deep inside its pages. Keys. My own house keys, which I always hang on a specific hook by the door, would be lying on the kitchen counter. Trivial things, easily explained away by tiredness or distraction. Except I'm a creature of habit. I notice these things. And the keys from the forest. They were a constant source of subtle disquiet. They remained cold to the touch, always, even when the apartment was warm. Sometimes, in the dead of night, when I'd get up for a glass of water, and my eyes were adjusted to the dark, I could swear the faint symbols on the largest key pulsed with a dim, sickly green light. Just for a second. If I blinked or turned on the lamp, they were just dull, inert metal again. I told myself it was a trick of the light, my eyes playing games. That feeling of being watched started then, maybe a week after I brought them home. a constant, prickling pressure at the back of my neck, the kind that makes the hairs stand on end. It was most intense when I was near the keys, when I was looking at them, or even just thinking about them. The forest, my former sanctuary, now filled me with a specific kind of dread. The thought of going back there, especially to that ancient oak, was repellent. These weren't just isolated incidents, a string of coincidences. This was something else, a pattern emerging from the static of everyday life. Something connected to those keys, to that box I'd so foolishly taken from the heart of Blackwood. I'm writing this now, a few weeks after finding them, because it's only gotten worse, much worse. The dreams are more terrifying, the noise is louder, the feeling of being watched almost unbearable at times. Something is terribly wrong, and I have the horrifying suspicion that this is just the beginning. It's been another week since I last wrote, and the word unbearable is starting to feel like a gross understatement. The subtle disturbances I mentioned before, they've amplified, twisted into something more insistent, more overtly menacing. Sleep is a luxury I can barely afford. And when I do drift off, it's into those same suffocating corridors, the air thick with that coppery, sweet scent of old blood and the incessant, maddening symphony of locks. The clicking, the sliding, the tumblers falling, it's the soundtrack to my nightmares and increasingly to my waking hours. My name, Alex, feels like a label for someone I used to be. Someone who didn't jump at every creak of the floorboards or stare into darkened corners with a heart hammering against his ribs. The life of a software developer, once a predictable cycle of code and coffee, has become a landscape of creeping dread. Blackwood Forest, my old sanctuary, now looms in my mind like a festering wound, a place I'm terrified of, yet inexplicably drawn to. The keys. It all comes back to the keys. They sit in their tarnished metal box on my desk, a constant, silent reproach. Their coldness has intensified. It's no longer just a lack of warmth. It's an active chill that seems to emanate from them, seeping into the wood of the desk, making the air around them feel degrees colder. Several times, I've found frost, delicate and crystalline, tracing the edges of the box, even though my apartment is heated. The faint green glow I'd occasionally glimpsed on the largest, most ornate key is no longer a trick of the light. It's undeniable now, a sickly, faint luminescence that pulses rhythmically in the dark, like a diseased heart. I've tried timing it, but the rhythm is inconsistent, erratic, as if responding to something I can't perceive. The compulsion to do something with them has grown stronger, more insidious. It's not just a vague curiosity anymore. It's a gnawing hunger in the back of my mind, a whisper that suggests these keys are not meant to be idle. They yearn for locks. The thought itself sends a shiver down my spine, because what kind of locks would these monstrous things open? And more importantly, what would be on the other side? The noises in the apartment have evolved. The faint scratching has become more deliberate, sometimes sounding like fingernails, dragging slowly across drywall, always just out of sight. The clicks are sharper, more metallic. And then there are the whispers. At first, I thought it was the heating system, or neighbors, or just my overtired brain manufacturing sounds. But they're too specific, too close. They are sibilant, hushed, and always unintelligible, like someone murmuring secrets just beyond the range of hearing. They're worst at night, when the city outside is quiet, and the only sounds should be the hum of the refrigerator or the distant wail of a siren. Sometimes, I swear I can hear the faintest echo of those dream locks, the distant, ghostly turning of tumblers, even when I'm wide awake. My work is suffering. How can I debug lines of code when my own reality feels like it's corrupting? I stare at my monitor, and the letters sometimes seem to shift and rearrange themselves into those worn symbols on the keys. I've caught myself unconsciously catching them on notepads, the intricate, thorny patterns of the largest key, the stark, angular lines of the others. My colleagues have started to notice. "Rough night, Alex," has become a common refrain, usually accompanied by a concerned glance at the dark circles under my eyes. The feeling of being watched is constant now, a heavy blanket of unseen scrutiny. It's like having 1,000 tiny needles pricking at my skin. It's strongest in my apartment, especially near the keys, but it follows me outside too. Walking down the street, I'll get the sudden, overwhelming urge to look over my shoulder, convinced I'll see someone or something standing there. There never is. Just ordinary people going about their ordinary lives, oblivious to the silent, invisible vortex of wrongness that seems to be centered on me. Last Tuesday, something happened that pushed me further down this spiral. I'd been working late, trying to catch up, and got home exhausted. I made a point of checking the box of keys on my desk, a ritual I'd developed, as if to confirm they hadn't sprouted legs and walked off. They were there, cold and silent. I went to bed, and for once, sleep came relatively quickly. But the dreams were worse than ever. Not just corridors this time, but vast, echoing chambers. The walls lined with doors, thousands of them, each with a complex, ancient-looking lock. And the keys, my keys, were in my hand, vibrating, almost painfully hot. A force was compelling me to try them, one by one. I woke up with a gasp, drenched in sweat, the phantom heat still tingling in my palm. The first gray light of dawn was filtering through my blinds. And then I saw it. The metal box was on my nightstand. I never put it there. Ever. I always leave it on my desk in the living room. My heart leaped into my throat. I sat bolt upright, staring at it. The lid was slightly ajar. Slowly, hesitantly, I reached out and lifted the lid. The keys were inside, but they weren't just lying there. They were arranged. The 5 keys were laid out in a distinct, deliberate pattern on the faded velvet, a star shape, with the largest, ornate key at the top point. I know I didn't do that. I would remember. The sheer impossibility of it, the deliberate, almost intelligent arrangement, terrified me more than the noises or the dreams. This wasn't just my mind playing tricks. This was something else. Something that could manipulate physical objects. Something that was trying to communicate. I tried to get rid of them. The next day, my resolve hardened by a potent cocktail of fear and adrenaline. I took the box and drove to the city dump. The smell was atrocious, a miasma of refuse and decay. I found a massive, overflowing dumpster at the far end, and with a surge of desperate hope, I threw the box in. It landed with a dull thud amidst the garbage. I didn't wait to see it buried. I just got back in my car and drove away. A massive weight seemingly lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something like relief. The relief lasted until I got home. There it was, sitting on my doorstep. The tarnished metal box. Not a scratch on it. Not a speck of grime from the dumpster. It was just there, as if I'd merely misplaced it. I didn't scream. I think I was beyond that. A cold, numb dread washed over me. I picked it up. It was heavier than I remembered. Or maybe my arms were just weak from shock. Inside, the keys were still arranged in that 5-pointed star. The message was clear. They weren't going anywhere. And whatever entity was tied to them wasn't going to let me off that easily. The pull towards Blackwood Forest has become almost unbearable. It's no longer a vague sense of unease or a repellent memory. It's a specific, targeted yearning. I can almost feel the ancient oak tree, the one where I found the box, calling to me. It's a dark, seductive whisper in my thoughts, promising what? Answers, more horror. I don't know. But the keys, they seem to resonate with this call. Sometimes, when the green glow on the largest key is particularly strong, I feel a corresponding thrum deep in my chest, a sympathetic vibration that tugs me eastward, towards the forest. I found something else yesterday, something that might be a clue, or just another layer to this nightmare. I was tidying up, a futile attempt to impose some order on my increasingly chaotic life, and I pulled out an old hiking guide for the Blackwood area. Tucked inside the back cover, so old the paper was yellowed and brittle, was a hand-drawn map. I've never seen it before in my life. It's not my handwriting. It depicts a section of Blackwood I don't recognize, deeper and more remote than I've ever ventured. And in the center of this unfamiliar territory, marked with a small, faded red X, is a crude drawing of an oak tree with unnervingly gnarled roots. Beneath the X, almost too faint to read, a single word is scrawled, ostium, Latin. I looked it up. It means doorway or entrance. A doorway to what? And why do I have the sickening feeling that these keys are meant to unlock it? The word, ostium, has been a brand seared into my thoughts for days now. A Latin whisper that echoes the cold dread emanating from the keys. My name, Alex, feels like a fading echo from a life that's rapidly unraveling. The software developer who once found solace in logic and order is now captive to a hand-drawn map and a set of impossible keys. The attempt to discard them, only to have them reappear on my doorstep, wasn't just unsettling, it was a declaration. These things, whatever they are, whatever it is that's connected to them, they're not done with me. Sleep offers no escape, only those labyrinthine corridors, the scent of decay and old blood, and the ceaseless, maddening clicks of unseen locks. The waking world is hardly better. The whispers in my apartment have grown more distinct, almost forming words I can't quite catch, like secrets being shared just out of earshot, always accompanied by a faint, chilling draft. The green glow from the largest key is now a constant, sickly pulse in the dim light of my living room, a beacon of wrongness. The pull towards Blackwood Forest, specifically towards the ancient oak depicted on that damnable map, has become an undeniable physical ache. It's a gnawing in my gut, a thrumming in my blood that resonates with the cold metal of the keys. I've tried to resist. God, how I've tried. I've thrown myself into work, stayed up late coding, anything to distract myself. But the map, tucked into my wallet, feels like a burning coal. The keys in their tarnished box seem to watch me. Yesterday, I knew I couldn't fight it anymore. The alternative, waiting in my apartment while my sanity frayed, and whatever presence was tied to these keys, grew bolder, was somehow worse than facing the unknown in that forest. If there's a doorway, an ostium, then these keys are meant for it. And some desperate, terrified part of me needs to know what lies beyond, even if it destroys me. Maybe, just maybe, understanding is the first step to ending this. Or maybe that's just what it wants me to think. So, this morning, before the sun had fully risen, casting long, eerie shadows across my living room, I made my decision. I packed a small backpack, a powerful flashlight, a water bottle, some protein bars, a first aid kit, and the hand-drawn map. And, of course, the metal box containing the 5 keys. Their coldness seemed to seep through the fabric of the backpack, a chilling weight against my spine. Driving towards Blackwood, the familiar roads felt alien. The town, usually a comforting backdrop to my life, seemed muted, its colors dull, as if a veil had been drawn over it. The forest itself loomed darker, more menacing than I'd ever remembered. The trees stood like silent, disapproving sentinels, their branches skeletal against the pale morning sky. Parking at the usual trailhead, I took a deep breath, the air already feeling heavy, tinged with the scent of damp earth and something else. Something faintly metallic that reminded me unpleasantly of my dreams. The usual sounds of the forest birdsong, the rustle of small animals, were conspicuously absent. A profound, unnatural silence hung in the air, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the path. The map was surprisingly accurate, though crudely drawn. It led me off the marked trails I knew so well, deeper into the tangled heart of Blackwood, into areas I'd never dared to explore before. The undergrowth here was thick, clawing at my clothes, and the canopy above was so dense that only slivers of gray light penetrated, plunging the forest floor into a perpetual twilight. The silence intensified, pressing in on my ears, making my own heartbeat sound unnervingly loud. Twice, I was sure I heard something moving parallel to me, just out of sight in the dense thicket. A rustling, a soft footfall. When I'd stop and call out, there was only silence. Animal, I told myself. Deer, maybe. But the feeling of being watched, that prickling sensation on my neck, was more intense than ever before, and it didn't feel like any animal I knew. The air grew colder, the metallic tang stronger, and then Through a gap in the gnarled trees, I saw it. The oak. It was a titan, even larger and more ancient looking than I remembered from my first encounter. Its bark a roadmap of centuries. Its roots like massive, arthritic knuckles gripping the earth. It dominated the small, gloomy clearing, its presence overwhelming, almost sentient. This was the tree from the map, the tree where I'd found the keys. The X on the map might as well have been pulsing with that same sickly green light as the largest key. I approached it slowly, my flashlight beam dancing over its immense trunk. The ground around its base was a mess of exposed roots and dark, damp soil. The map indicated the ostium was at the northern base, hidden amongst the largest cluster of roots. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the oppressive silence. There, nestled between two colossal, intertwining roots that formed a dark, shadowed alcove, was a section of the trunk that looked different. The bark was smoother, almost unnaturally so, and there was a faint, almost imperceptible seam, a vertical line that didn't look like a natural crack. It was as if a section of the tree itself was a cleverly disguised door. This had to be it. The ostium. My hand trembled as I unzipped my backpack and took out the metal box. Opening it, the 5 keys lay on their faded velvet bed, the largest one at the top of its star pattern, its ornate bow seeming to wreathe in the dim light, its green luminescence more pronounced. Here, in the heart of its domain, it felt colder than ice, yet it also thrummed with a faint, almost eager vibration against my fingertips. Which key? The largest one, the one with the intricate, thorny pattern and the cryptic symbols, seemed to call to me. It felt like the master key, the one meant for this ancient, hidden lock. With a deep, shuddering breath, I took it from the box. As I brought it closer to the smooth section of bark, the green glow intensified, casting eerie shadows on the surrounding roots. The air crackled with a strange energy, and the metallic scent was suddenly overpowering, mixed with the smell of damp earth and something else. Something sweet and cloying, like overripe fruit on the verge of decay. There was no visible keyhole, but as the tip of the key neared the faint vertical seam, the symbols on its shaft began to glow with the same sickly green light. I pressed it gently against the wood. For a moment, nothing. Then, with a soft, grating sound, like stone grinding against stone, the tip of the key sank into the trunk, as if the wood had turned to soft clay. My breath hitched. I pushed. The key slid further in, up to its bow. There was a deep, resonant thunk that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath my feet, followed by a series of smaller, internal clicks, like massive tumblers falling into place. The sound echoed the locks in my dreams with horrifying fidelity. The vertical seam on the trunk glowed faintly, then widened. A dark, narrow opening appearing in the side of the ancient oak. It wasn't a wooden door swinging open, but rather the tree itself parting, the wood receding into itself. The opening was no more than 2 feet wide, and perhaps 5 feet high, a sliver of absolute blackness against the dark bark. A gust of air puffed out from the opening, cold, stale, and carrying that same sweet, metallic, blood-like odor, but stronger now, almost nauseating. And with it, a whisper, so faint I almost missed it, but this time, it was a word. A single, sibilant word that seemed to slither into my ear. Welcome. My blood ran cold. Every instinct screamed at me to turn and run. To get as far away from this place, this tree, these keys, as humanly possible. But the compulsion, the dark curiosity that had led me this far, held me rooted to the spot. The largest key was still embedded in the tree, its green glow a malevolent invitation. What was inside? What had I unlocked? Steeling myself, I aimed my flashlight into the narrow opening. The beam seemed to be swallowed by the darkness, penetrating only a few feet. It illuminated a passage, not of wood, but of what looked like smooth, dark, tightly packed earth, curving away out of sight. It was like looking into the gullet of some enormous, subterranean creature. The walls glistened wetly in the flashlight beam, and from the depths of that passage I heard it, a soft, rhythmic sound, a wet, dragging shuffle, and a faint, almost inaudible clicking, like the locks from my dreams, but closer now, much closer. Something was in there. Or something was coming. Before I could react, before I could pull the key out, or slam the impossible door shut, a tendril of something dark and glistening, no thicker than my thumb, snaked out from the blackness with terrifying speed. It wrapped around my wrist, its touch shockingly cold and strong, like a band of icy steel. I cried out, a strangled yelp of pure terror, yanking my arm back. But the tendril held fast, its grip tightening, pulling me forward, towards the gaping maw in the ancient oak. The flashlight clattered from my other hand, plunging the immediate area into deeper shadow, lit only by the ghastly green glow of the key still embedded in the tree, and the sliver of absolute darkness that was the ostium. I'm being pulled into the tree, pulled into the dark. The sweet, cloying scent is overwhelming. The clicking is getting louder. I don't know what's in there, but it knows I'm here. And it's strong. I'm not sure who or what am anymore, scribbling this down in stolen moments. The sickly green glow of the largest key, my only consistent light source. The forest, blackwood, the ancient oak. The ostium, these words now define the horrifying reality I'm trapped in. The tendril, that's where everything tilted from terrifying into a realm of impossible, visceral horror. Panic, raw and absolute, flooded my system as the cold, strong tendril tightened its grip on my wrist. It was surprisingly smooth, yet unyielding, like a living icicle fused with muscle. I remember scrabbling at the damp earth with my free hand, my boots skidding on loose soil and decaying leaves, trying to find purchase, to resist the inexorable pull towards that sliver of absolute blackness within the oak. The sweet, cloying odor, now thick with the metallic tang of blood, and something else, something ancient and fungal, filled my nostrils, gagging me. No, I choked out, the sound pathetic even to my own ears. The flashlight lay a few feet away, its beam pointing uselessly at the canopy, a mocking beacon of the normal world I was being dragged from. The only other light came from the largest key, still embedded in the tree, door pulsing its diseased green light. illuminating the grotesque tableau of my struggle. The pull was relentless. The tendril, though no thicker than my thumb, possessed an unnatural strength. It wasn't just dragging me, it felt like it was reeling me in, with a sickening, rhythmic tug. I could feel the rough bark of the tree scraping against my side as I was hauled closer to the opening. The darkness within the ostium seemed to deepen, to breathe, and the clicking, that awful, familiar clicking from my nightmares, grew louder, accompanied by a wet, dragging sound that suggested something immense and heavy was shifting within the unseen depths. My fingers clawed at the edge of the opening, desperate for a handhold. The wood felt strangely yielding, almost like hardened flesh. For a heart-stopping moment, my grip held. But then another tendril, thicker this time, shot out from the darkness with horrifying speed. It whipped around my ankle, its touch just as cold, just as strong. Now I was being pulled from 2 points, my body contorting, the strain on my limbs agonizing. A scream tore from my throat, swallowed by the oppressive silence of the forest and the hungry void of the ostium. I twisted, thrashed, but it was useless. The tendrils were too strong, their grip too sure. With a final, brutal yank, I was pulled off my feet and dragged headfirst into the suffocating blackness. The transition was instantaneous and horrifying. One moment I was in the dim, earthy clearing. The next I was in somewhere else. The air changed immediately. It was cold, damp, and thick with that unbearable stench. The passage I'd glimpsed with the flashlight was real, but it wasn't just earth. The walls were slick, glistening, and seemed to pulse with a faint, internal rhythm, as if I was inside the gullet of some colossal beast. The ground beneath me was soft yielding and disturbingly warm. I landed in a heap, the breath knocked out of me. The tendrils released their grip as suddenly as they had seized me, retracting back into the oppressive darkness ahead. I lay there, gasping, disoriented, every nerve screaming. The only light now was the faint, residual green glow from the key still, lodged in the outside of the tree door, filtering weakly through the narrow opening I'd just been dragged through. And, to my utter horror, the metal box of keys, which must have been slung across my body or fallen from my backpack during the struggle, lay a few feet away from me on the soft floor of this organic tunnel. One of the smaller, simpler keys had spilled out. My first coherent thought was to escape. I scrambled to my knees, ignoring the throbbing pain in my wrist and ankle, and lunged for the opening. But as I reached it, the faint seam of light began to narrow. The tree, the ostium, was closing. With a deep, groaning sound, like ancient grinding together, the opening sealed shut, plunging me into absolute, terrifying darkness. The last sliver of green light from the master key vanished, and a profound, echoing thud resonated through the passage, the sound of a final, irrevocable seal. The lock had turned. I was trapped. Panic threatened to consume me. I pounded on the spot where the opening had been, my fists meeting a surface that was yielding yet utterly impenetrable, like trying to punch through a wall of dense, living gristle. It was no use. Then I remembered the box of keys. My fingers, clumsy with terror, fumbled for it in the dark. I found it. Its cold metal a stark contrast to the warm, damp floor. I ripped it open. The remaining 4 keys were inside. And as my fingers brushed against them, a faint, almost imperceptible light began to emanate from them, not the sickly green of the largest key, but a dim, silvery, white glow, just enough to push back the absolute blackness by a few inches, revealing the horrifyingly organic texture of the tunnel around me. The clicking sound started again, closer this time, echoing from deeper within the tunnel. And the dragging, shuffling noise. It was coming for me. I had to move. Staying here meant certain death, or worse. The tunnel seemed to slope gently downwards, away from the sealed entrance. With no other option, clutching the faintly glowing box of keys, I began to crawl. The passage was tight, claustrophobic. The walls pulsed rhythmically, and the air was thick with a cloying sweetness that made my stomach churn. Every few feet, I would encounter other, smaller tendrils, hanging limply from the ceiling or protruding from the walls like grotesque veins. They were inert for now, but the memory of their cold, strong grip was fresh in my mind. How long I crawled, I don't know. Time seemed to have lost all meaning in this subterranean nightmare. The silence, apart from my own ragged breathing and the distant, approaching clicks and shuffles, was absolute. My software developer brain, the part of me that craved logic and order, was screaming. This was impossible. This couldn't be real. Yet the cold metal of the keys in my hand, the slick, pulsing walls around me, the stench filling my lungs, it was all undeniably, terrifyingly real. The tunnel began to widen, opening into a larger chamber. The silvery glow from the keys in the box, slightly, as if responding to the increased space, casting faint, dancing shadows on the walls. This chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in the oppressive darkness above. The floor was still soft and yielding, but here and there, strange, pillar-like structures rose from it, resembling massive, petrified bones, or the calcified roots of some nightmare tree. And in the center of the chamber, the source of the clicking and shuffling became terrifyingly clear. It was a creature, if such a word could even apply. It was huge, a mountain of glistening, dark flesh that seemed to be composed of countless intertwined tendrils, like the ones that had dragged me in, but thicker, more powerful. It moved with a slow, ponderous, dragging motion, its immense bulk shifting and resettling, and embedded all over its grotesque body, like horrific, metallic parasites or locks, hundreds of them. Ancient, ornate locks of all shapes and sizes, some rusted and decaying, others gleaming with a dark, oily sheen. And as the creature moved, the locks clicked and turned, tumblers falling, bolts sliding. A constant, maddening symphony of internal mechanisms. It was the sound from my dreams, amplified 1,000-fold. The creature had no discernible face, no eyes that I could see, but I felt its attention turned towards me. A deep, guttural rumble echoed through the chamber, a sound that vibrated in my very bones. Several of the tendrils on its surface detached and began to snake towards me, questing, exploring. The keys in the box in my lap suddenly grew warmer, the silvery light pulsing more intensely. One of them, a long, slender key with a simple, almost skeletal bow, vibrated with a particular urgency. The whispers I'd heard in my apartment, the unintelligible murmurs returned, but clearer now, coiling around my thoughts. One lock, one key. A passage. A way. Was this it? Was this the purpose of these cursed things? To open these. One of the creature's tendrils, thick as my arm, was now only a few feet away, its tip quivering as if tasting the air. The locks on its surface clicked and whirred. I could see one clearly now, a heavy, circular lock of blackened iron. Its keyhole a dark, inviting slit. It looked impossibly old. The slender key in the box pulsed again, almost painfully hot. This one. Open this one. I had no choice. To stay here was to be consumed. With a trembling hand, I snatched the slender, glowing key from the box. As I did, the other keys in the box dimmed slightly. This was the one. Taking a ragged breath, I lunged forward, towards the approaching tendril, towards the ancient iron lock. The creature paused, its clicking momentarily ceasing, as if surprised by my sudden movement. I jammed the key into the lock. It slid in with a sickening ease. Perfect. I turned it. There was a deafening crack, like a giant bone snapping, and the iron lock sprang open with a shower of rust and ancient dust. The tendril it was attached to went limp, falling to the fleshy floor with a wet slap, and for a split second, through the now open mechanism of the lock, I saw not the creature's dark flesh, but a glimpse of something else, a brief, impossible flash of starlight, of a clear night sky. Then it was gone, the lock's interior reverting to impenetrable blackness. But the creature recoiled, a huge shudder passing through its mountainous form. A chorus of clicks and whirs erupted from its countless other locks, a sound of agitation, of pain. Another whisper, urgent, desperate, more. Open more. Find the way, OUT. The remaining 3 keys in the box began to glow brighter, each one pulsing with its own distinct rhythm. Each one, I now understood with chilling certainty, corresponding to another lock. On this horrifying gatekeeper, my ordeal was far from over. I had found the keys in the forest, and they had led me to this. Now, it seemed, my only hope of survival was to use them, to unlock the path through this living nightmare, one terrifying lock at a time. But what other horrors awaited me if I succeeded? And what if I failed?